Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you very much for joining me today. We've got some fantastic guests lined up for this afternoon's session on the topic of rehabilitation and digital therapeutics technologies. I can see two of my guests waiting in the studio already. Lucia Panese is the next one up, and she'll be followed by Sarah Hill of Helium. So before introducing Lucia, I'm just going to play a little video sting which gives an illustration of the kind of work that Imaginary does with their flagship product, Rehability. Oh, good afternoon, Lucia. It's nice to see you again. It seems like only a few hours ago since we were speaking the last time. So I wonder if we could begin by you introducing yourself, and I very much hope we don't have a technical problem here because Lucia is frozen on her screen and her microphone seems to be muted. So I don't know if you can unmute your microphone, Lucia, and then I will ask you to talk about yourself. Okay, Lucia, can you begin by telling me a little bit about yourself and also the background to Imaginary and your flagship Rehability product?
Hi, David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So I could hear you, Lucia. So if you want to begin, we will see if we can make it work.
Now I can hear you, David. Sorry, I think it's my internet connection, honestly.
Okay. Please tell us about yourself and Imaginary.
Yes, thank you. My name is Lucia Pannese. I'm the CEO of Imaginary. It's a company based in Milano, in Italy, specializing in serious games. So what we've been doing for the last 17 years is working a lot on EU-funded research and specifically looking into how games and gamification can support health and care. And through several research projects and then engineering phases, we ended up creating this framework system called Rehability, which is meant to organize telerehabilitation of specific patients, so offering rehabilitation at home via games. So every exercise is transformed into a digital game. And one of the peculiarities is that the games are co-designed together with the patients.
Okay, so your products have got a CE mark in Europe. Can you explain why you chose to go down the route of having the product medically certified?
Well, actually, it's a request by many hospitals or most hospitals, because if they want to connect a digital solution into what we could call a patient journey or medical procedures and protocols, and if they want to base on the results of using digital tools some medical decisions, which can also only be, it is time to do a validated test. So without the need of being validated itself as a testing system, for example, or as an assessment, they need to have a medical device. If it's not a medical device, they can just suggest it maybe as a motivational tool, but they could never base any kind of clinical decision on top of any kind of result that you can produce.
So rehability is also designed so that patients can be cared for and have rehabilitation in their home environment. So could you just explain how that works, how it might begin in a clinic or a pharmacy with an assessment of a patient, and then what happens after that?
Yes, normally the adventure of a patient using rehabilitation starts in the clinic together with physiotherapists and or neuropsychologists. And then clearly the clinic needs to have some sort of inclusion criteria to decide if the patient is the right one to use the system on his own or on her own at home. So in this case, the patient will get a so-called home kit, which is, you can imagine, a microcomputer with a camera. It's a camera able to read the patient's joints, which they plug into the TV. So they see the system on the TV screen. So it's something that they already have at home. And just with a remote control, which is very easy to handle, they can start a rehabilitation program at home, which actually is being created and monitored remotely from the clinic. So in other words, the owner of the rehabilitation process remains the specialist in the clinic. So the specialist monitors everything that happens. They decide if anything needs to be changed in the process, and the patient can train on the days that are set in the therapy calendar, actually from the comfort of their own home.
So they go through a series of rehabilitation exercises which have been designed by the professionals, but you have a what you might call a plug and play box that goes into the television set. So presumably the support by the physiotherapist is not in real time. The data is collected on the box, is it? And then uploaded to a server where the physiotherapist or the professional can access the data and check the patient's progress.
Yeah, exactly. Data flows directly into the cloud, so it's not even stored into the box. And the therapist can always check where the patient is in the journey, what data are being produced. So the therapist can decide if it's time maybe to check on the patient or to change something in the therapy plan. So what we're discussing here in this moment is telling us that what is needed is a rehabilitation protocol, which is a little bit different from what is being used today. So in other words, the work of a therapist together with a remote patient needs to be organized in an innovative way. And actually, I think this is one of the things that we are working on with some customers and partners. Actually, they are more partners than customers. Like we had this morning also, Paolo Emilia, for example, because they have to get organized with this kind of new organization for the therapist.
So it's a new kind of practice for physiotherapists. Would be one of the benefits of the solution would be presumably improving the productivity of the physiotherapist. Does it allow them to effectively look after more patients?
Yes, of course. This is one of the benefits that we have from the side of the clinic, because a therapist, once a working protocol is in place, can dedicate probably say 10 minutes to 15 minutes per week to a patient if the patient is quite autonomous, instead of staying for the whole, say, 45 minutes of therapy, maybe 3 times a week together with the patient. So imagine that a huge hospital in the area of central Italy in Rome, they told me that 80% of the patients that they have in rehabilitation in all the medical areas could be fine to do rehabilitation on their own, while only 20% really needs a therapist personally at their site to train. So imagine how many resources you can have there. And also you can offer much longer therapy time frames, because, for example, in Italy, after you have a stroke, you get only, say, 20 sessions of therapy per year, while you could give the patient some months of therapy in this case, because the therapist is dedicating to you only a few minutes per week.
Yeah, I can see that. And are you supported by the government? Does the government put funding into the physiotherapists for these kind of treatments at the moment?
No, the government is not funding anything, at least not for us. I don't know if they fund any clinics. I doubt it, honestly. What we need from the government, and luckily I think they are trying to sort it out, is to norm reimbursement. In other terms, the government's task in this case, the first one, the priority would be to regulate how reimbursement happens if a patient is doing telerehabilitation with digital tools. Because if that is the case, then all the public hospitals and all the therapists and people paid by the NHS could actually be using such a system. So I think this is their priority right now.
Yes, I think particularly in this days of COVID-19 and coronavirus and post-COVID and long COVID, all of these things are accelerating digital transformation, which brings me to our next guest. So I'm going to add Sarah Hill from Helium into our stream. Hello, Sarah, and welcome. I'm going to thank Lucia now for her contribution this morning. And I'm going to ask you, Sarah, in a minute to introduce yourself, say something about your background, how you got involved in your company, Helium, and what Helium does.
Absolutely. David, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for letting us share. So my name is Sarah Hill. I'm the CEO of Helium, and Helium is a digital drug for stress management and human performance. Clinically validated to improve your calm, your focus, your mood quickly in as little as 4 minutes. My background is as a television journalist. I spent decades in media. This is a form of media. It's therapeutic media. And Helium is used worldwide in areas of acute situational confined stress, as well as with the average consumer in their homes.
Okay, so TV broadcasting is absolutely no problem for you. You're a seasoned professional by the sounds of it. So just describe a little bit about how Helium works and what the benefits are to the patient.
Yeah, and it's not patients who we serve. It's actually people outside of healthcare institutions. So athletes and also worker athletes, what we call worker athletes. Nurses, first responders, firefighters, people who are working on the front lines of COVID. This is the Stress Olympics right now, and not everyone has trained for it. And so people are looking, enterprises are looking as well for drugless, non-harmful coping mechanisms that allow you to take a walk in the park when you can't physically take a walk in the park due to either your situation and you needed to escape. What's unique about Helium compared to all of the other products out there as it relates to mindfulness and meditation is that not only is it set in a spatial computing environment in either augmented reality just with your phone or in virtual reality with the goggles, but it allows you to control the experiences with your body's own electricity. So you actually get feedback to see what your brain patterns, what your EEG brain patterns are doing in near real time when you're doing the experience. And it also allows you to train to become more self-aware of those brain patterns, and also more self-aware of what specifically kind of meditation, in quotes, that you need, because not all meditations are the same. So with Helium, you can plug in an EEG headband. We use a BrainLink light. We're hardware agnostic. So eventually anything that captures data we'll be able to put into Helium. But with an EEG headband, you can see your own brain patterns displayed on the screen as a little firefly that goes up and down. And as you calm your mind or increase your focus, it's powered by your focus calm, so powered by your flow. As you increase your flow, that firefly goes up and the environment responds to you. So for instance, one of the experiences that we'll be releasing later this year is a jaguar. It's a stressed animal. And you can actually, the stressed animal in augmented reality or in virtual reality in the goggles reacts to you and your own brain patterns. So as you increase those feelings of focus calm, that stressed animal starts in an agitated pounce position. The colors on its fur change. It sits down right next to you. It softens and it starts to lick its paw. So again, giving the user a visual to learn to self-regulate, and then also create a stored memory that they can go back to when they get in a stressful situation. And it's very easy to understand. Helium is also popular with youth and young adults who are, looking for beyond close your eyes and meditate. This is open your eyes, become more self-aware of your emotions, and train. So you might think of Helium like a video game that you play with your own brain patterns and heart rate that has the extra added benefit of having some value to the user as it relates to increasing their focus, their calm, and improving their mood.
Well, I think this is a solution which is tailor-made for today's circumstances. And you rightly made the differentiation between patients and users. And one of the things that I'm keen to try and establish with Digimed TV is that it should be mainly focused on preventative healthcare and addressing the needs of exactly the kind of people that you're talking about, people who are not currently under some kind of medical regime, but are suffering from modern life, be it coronavirus related or other aspects to it. But you did mention, I think at the beginning, unless I misheard you, that it is FDA approved. Is that correct?
No. Helium is not, we don't make medical claims. So it's not regulated by the FDA. It's not a replacement for psychotropic medication or even professional counseling, which is one of the best things that people can do for themselves. Think of Helium like a training tool, a self-awareness tool, and a meditation tool that allows you to see your brain patterns and heart rate and become more self-aware of what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to market opportunities, I think this type of solution is very appropriate. Because one of the things that I see going forward is that we will become less dependent on medical professionals for solutions certainly in the health and well-being area than we have been in the past. It's not to kind of decry the capabilities of the medical profession, but they are under a lot of pressure. And if we can make society more healthy generally with solutions like yours, I think it can only be to the benefit of everybody. So how do you see things going forward in your roadmap for Helium?
Right. So right now we have 2 compatible wearables on our platform, an Apple Watch and also a BrainLink Lite. We'll be adding additional wearables later this year. And as it relates to resilience, I believe is the word that you're referencing. we need mental health hygiene tools, just like we need physical hygiene tools. Just as people wash their hands, they also need to be having some regular practices on what they do to flush those ruminating thoughts, if you will, out of their mind. And that's what Helium is. These are, in some ways, they are mental fitness training that you can learn to self-regulate, but they're also mental health hygiene stations, mental fitness stations that we're installing in enterprises that are either a clean box. Clean box, if you're not familiar with it, is a great product that you just put your virtual reality headset and it lives there. It's always on and always clean, and people can take it off as they need that virtual piece. We also sell them in cases. You can mount them up on the wall. So I think we'll see that more and more, these mental health hygiene stations rolling out to those enterprises as people are returning to work. They're looking for solutions, drugless solutions to quickly downshift their nervous system and escape and get some virtual peace.
Well, I will say amen to all of that. And presumably you are talking about a B2B2C business model where you're perhaps targeting the corporate sector or hospitals, large organizations who will provide this kind of service for their staff and their contacts.
Yes, those
probably
worker athletes, as we call them, healthcare workers. Helium, a study will be published later this year about using helium on the front lines for healthcare workers, nurses, for compassion fatigue, is a huge issue right now. And so while it's absolutely important to get tools into the hands of patients, we really like to focus on those people who are serving those patients. Burnout is a huge issue, and when you reduce that stress, and when you increase focus, you increase working memory, which reduces the likelihood of errors. It improves sleep. It allows you to make better management decisions. So there are great benefits of becoming more self-aware of your emotion and learning to self-regulate that stress and anxiety.
Well, I think that's a wonderful opportunity for me to introduce Dr. Tanjit Singh, who's speaking to us all the way from Singapore. He's really literally on the other side of the world to you, but I think in terms of the solution that he's going to talk about, you have an awful lot in common and a lot of potential really to collaborate with each other. So thank you for the moment, Sarah. I hope you'll stay with us and join in the conversation perhaps later on. But for now, I'm going to bring in Dr. Tanjit Singh. Well, hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Singapore. Very nice to see you again.
Yes.
Can I ask you to begin by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, Lotus Elder Care, how you became involved in the solution that you're going to talk about now?
All right. I'm a medical doctor by training, and I'm still a practicing physician, and I provide long-term care services for the elderly and those who are disabled. And I see a lot of stressed caregivers as well in my practice. So I have been involved in this company, Digimed, that is in Korea. And Korea is a very highly strung country with lots of very stressed people. So they have this company, Digimed, that is set up in 2012 that provide digital therapeutics for stressed individuals. And my CEO is somebody that is very deeply involved in depression and stress. He's a clinical psychologist and he used to work in the military service as well. So I'm actually involved in the company as the head of the Digital Therapeutics Research Center, and I'm recommending one of our application, which is in the same vein as what Helium and Sarah actually said, but a bit different from what they are doing. And so there's a huge potential in collaboration. So what we do have is an app that can be downloaded, and we use photo seismography technology in the smartphone using the light source of the smartphone, and using your finger, we actually detect your pulse rate variability, your pulse rate, your sympathetic, parasympathetic, autonomic nervous activity, and then we give you a figure. So I just check before I log on, and luckily my stress level is low. So it will recommend some content, some options that I can do, that is actually a well-known psychological treatment like meditation, breathing, sound therapy, emotion diary, rethink, ASMR sounds that actually calms the person down. So we are like a wellness app that is like a wellness first aid for people that are stressed. And we target also the frontline workers in the hospitals, firefighters, crisis workers, stress caregivers, students that are stressed doing their exams, and essentially anyone else that's feeling stressed in this pandemic.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're not stressed by being on Digimed TV. I'd hate to think that I cause you problems. Oh, okay.
Yep, I have done it. Yep. So
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so following on from what Sarah was talking about, when we had a discussion last week, you mentioned that you are looking to collaborate with other companies so that you can have interfaces with both diagnostic tools that provide biofeedback in the same way that Helium used for their product, and also you can interface with solutions, perhaps again like Helium, that provide these restful environments that work together. So yeah, can you just say a little bit more about the opportunities that you see for collaboration with people in the same kind of space as Helium?
Well, essentially, we provide a number on stress with our technologies, and we can be used in various biopsychology feedback mechanisms that we are monitoring. Like I said, we are monitoring the biomarkers of stress, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, and that could, for example, a user of Helium could track their well-being physiologically, after they have used Helium, the solution, and that itself gives them a nice number, to track that cells and give them, some feedback that what they are doing, how they have used Helium has been great and has actually helped them to relax them more. It's both, if we can see numbers, sometimes, we get a bit more motivated, to continue with the practice, and it can change behavior. It's like a blood pressure machine where you take the medication, and if you see your pressure comes down to a good level, you know that the medications have been working. So we are some sort like that, and also we provide through our AI system a few solutions that can help the person calm down. That's why we're branding our app as a mental first aid. So, if you're feeling stressed, use the program, calm yourself down, because right now everybody is having a handphone, within reach, and it's so easy to use.
Okay, well, we have some people joining us from different parts of the world. Hassan El Safar Balok, I'm not sure whether I pronounced that correctly. He's joined us from KL in Malaysia, one of my favorite cities. I'm not sure whether the question was for you or for Sarah, but can you comment on whether the content that you use is video based? You do provide live feedback, though, presumably.
Well, for our app, essentially, you just need to download our app, put your finger over the light source because we're using photophotography, and we just have to click this button called measurements. It will start to measure my stress level, and that's all. And then they will recommend that, what is your stress from 0 to 100, when I actually tested myself real time when I was talking to doing a very stressful consultation for a patient, and it's actually high. So it's it's pretty interesting. But of course, I couldn't do the therapy there and there because I'm talking with the patient. But I could show that it kind of works, and it's been very, very interesting. So basically, that's it. Our system is pretty simple. It's an app. It uses the light source and the camera of your phone to detect some biological markers, and then we, using our AI from this data that we collected from the camera, we give you some recommendation of a solution, mental first aid.
So, like Sarah Hill with Helium, you made a conscious decision to go down the B2B to C route without any kind of CE mark or FDA approval. So you'll be working with the same kinds of clients that Helium will be working with. Well, I can see that we've got in our studio Ben Wilkins and Gianpaolo Bricchetto. Ben is our next speaker, so I'm not sure whether he can hear me at the moment. He has suddenly appeared, so he can see me. So I'm going to bring Ben into the studio, and I'm going to ask him to say a little bit about himself. And for now, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon from Singapore. Hi, Ben. Where are you speaking to us from?
Hi, David. I am calling from London in the UK.
Okay, well, not as far away as Singapore, but we've really been global this morning. We've had somebody from the USA, Italy, now Singapore, and you from London, and very shortly we should be going to Gianpaolo Bricchetto, who I think is also in Italy. So Ben, can you begin by just introducing yourself and saying something about the background to Good Boost and what you do with Good Boost?
Sure, David. So my background is in MSc Science and Rehab. So I trained as an osteopath originally. Then went in to look more at the research around community delivery of exercise rehabilitation for people with musculoskeletal conditions. I'm an MSK clinical champion for Versa Arthritis, which is the leading charity in the UK working with people with MSK conditions and arthritis. I'm currently completing a fellowship researching the role of gamification for older adult rehabilitation. And my day job is I'm the co-founder and CEO of Good Boost. And as Good Boost, we're a social enterprise that's been working for the past few years to work out how to transform public spaces into rehabilitation spaces, places like public pools, leisure centres, retirement settings, using technology, but where technology isn't the sole focus, because we've learned from a behavioural point of view, just throwing technology or an app at rehab or health habits just isn't the grand solution in its own right.
So you are talking about patients. You know, we've had this differentiation in our last two speakers between patients who have a pre-existing condition like the ones that you've described, and users who may be suffering from stress and burnout from their work. But just to clarify, you are working particularly with people with pre-existing conditions. Could you say a little bit about the main conditions that you are targeting?
Yeah, I think that the title patients is a really challenging one to put forward, because the moment you give someone a diagnosis, they can see themselves as suddenly becoming a patient and being identified with that label. When you look at things like MSK conditions, they are so prevalent and so common, saying to everyone that they are a patient or they are suffering of this condition, I think undermines the fact that it's relatively normal that throughout someone's lifespan, they will have a musculoskeletal or a joint pain condition. If you look at the current rates of musculoskeletal conditions globally, there's about 1.3 billion people with an MSK condition. There was a report that came out in the Lancet by the WHO at the end of last year that there were 2.4 billion people on the planet in need of some form of rehabilitation because of their health condition, mostly long-term health condition, the majority being an MSK condition. I think the moment we start terming everyone that has a condition as a patient and saying that they need to go through a health system to get recovery, it's part of the problem, because the perception then is that as an individual, I have this diagnosis, I am a patient, I must engage with this physio, this doctor, this consultant as part of my journey to get better. But we know with a lot of long-term health conditions, a vast majority of the management of those conditions are actually really effective when they're self-led. Lifestyle changes, physical activity, dietary changes, other lifestyle factors are such an effective way to manage those conditions. I think it's a bad idea if we start labeling everyone with a health condition suddenly as a patient. I think we need to make that distinction more often.
I think that is a point very well made, and I do certainly agree with you on that point. Can we move on now to the strategy that you're using behind Good Boost? We mentioned gamification, we've spoken about serious games this morning. Can you just explain some of the elements of gamification that you use and how they work in practice with your users?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, first of all, why do we use gamification? Is because just because you tell people that things like physical activity, exercise are good for them, it doesn't mean that people create the behaviors. It's not that people don't know better. We all know better. We know that exercise is good for us. It's that we don't always do better. It's not a knowledge deficit. It's a behavior deficit that we're dealing with. And that we just don't always do what's in our long-term best interest, because generally, hard work like doing exercise and rehab, it usually pays off in the future, sometimes weeks to months to years down the line. But laziness, putting Netflix on, kind of having something nice like a cake on the side, laziness pays off right now. And that's the thing we're really struggling with and tackling with when it comes into healthy habits. And that's why gamification is such a powerful tool. So if you look at the gaming industry, it's around $2 billion as a value. It's bigger than both the music and film industry put together. It's been highly effective at monetizing certain game characteristics that are really addictive, that create repetitive behaviors. So it's looking at how do we best understand those mechanics that underlie other games and put them into things like rehabilitation to make some things that people want to do, not told to do by a clinician, a doctor, a physiotherapist. So what we look at within Good Boost in terms of gamification is, in terms of what we're developing and working on now, is looking at group mentality. So we know that some of the biggest things to create behaviors are to do with social relationships. So that moment we can create activities, challenges, games related to exercise, related to rehab, that you do as a team, a true team with other human beings using technology, and you collectively collaborate or compete together. It's one of the strongest ways to create behaviors. And when you look at things like fundraising, we know that when people do things like fundraising for charities, when they do it with at least one more people, they are likely to raise about 100% more in fundraising, each individual person within that team, compared to an individual fundraising by themselves. There is something about that social contract that if I don't achieve this, I let the team down, not just myself, I let the team down, which is such a strong and motivating factor. And that's what we're working on implementing through Good Boost at the moment.
Yes, I've observed this in some other solutions. There's a local developer of wearable devices, and they had a product called Buddy Band 2, and they had a project involving Boy Scouts. And so the idea was that a group of Boy Scouts, you had several groups of Boy Scouts, maybe 5 or 10 in a group with these devices. And the idea was that collectively they had to accumulate their steps to take the journey from Baden-Powell's birthplace in South Africa back to their home in Northampton. So all of the steps that they recorded were going towards a team total, and so you've got a competition and rivalry between the two groups. Now, I've seen some of the pictures of your groups doing aquatherapy with a tablet. Can you just explain a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so where we started working with some of the most challenging groups to become active, people who, older adults, multiple long-term health conditions, dealing with an MSK conditions, usually living with high pain. Pain is one of the most cited reasons for barriers to be physically active. So we started looking at what were the environments where people could move in, particularly when we started, people who were, say, waiting for a hip and knee replacement, or who were recently receiving a hip and knee replacement. We know that activity in water is well tolerated, and also preferred by a lot of individuals too with MSK conditions. So we started working in water, and we decided, well, how do we personalize this for people? Because in the pool, you may have 10 people with 10 different conditions, 10 different confidence levels, 10 different levels of ability. So that's where it started. And we started putting people in the water, using waterproof tablets and using AI systems to make sure that everything was personalized to every user, so that we could transform any swimming pool space into a therapeutic and rehabilitation place. And the idea is that when they're in water, having that personalized program, they'll move more by creating this social connection. They have fun and enjoy it, and as a result, feel better over time.
Well, thanks very much for that, Ben. I can see Gianpaolo Bricchetto in the studio waiting to be our next guest. So I'm going to bring him in the studio now and say thank you to you, Ben, for joining us this afternoon, and welcome Gianpaolo, and ask him to say a little bit about himself and his organisation. So thank you once again, Ben. So, Gianpaolo, we haven't met either physically or virtually. I'm grateful to Lucia Panese for the introduction to you. And can I ask you to begin by saying a little bit about yourself, your background, and the kind of work that you currently do in this space?
Yeah, I am. My name is Gianpaolo Bricchetto. I live in Italy. I am a physician by background, in particular in the field of rehabilitation. And I am currently, my role is the clinical director of the Italian Multiple Sclerosis Society rehabilitation centers that are located mainly in the north of Italy. So my role is to guide these clinical centers, in which we are following more than 2,000 people with multiple sclerosis from a rehabilitative perspective. But I am also, by background, I'm a researcher in the field of rehabilitation. In particular, I'm interested in the topic of the use of technology for monitoring, assess, and also treat people with diseases, in particular neurodegenerative diseases. And in this context, I am also the vice president of the European organization RIMS, Rehabilitation in Multiple Sclerosis. And here I am.
Well, thank you very much. I am grateful to you for joining us this afternoon. Could you just say to me, because although my father I did suffer from multiple sclerosis, we didn't find that out until after he had died. The doctor only was looking at his notes when I went to the hospital where he was lying, and the doctor was looking at his notes, and he said, "Oh, I see your father had multiple sclerosis," and neither me nor my mum knew anything about it. So could you begin by just explaining to me just a little bit about the traditional therapies for multiple sclerosis, regardless of technology?
Yeah. Multiple sclerosis is a neurodegenerative disease, and the let's say the disease hits in particular younger people from 25 to 45 years old, more or less, and is a chronic disease. So year after year, you are in a situation in which you are accumulating disability. So the first important therapy for multiple sclerosis is, of course, drugs, and in particular disease-modifying therapies. These drugs are extremely important in order to prevent the disease progression year after year. But the other, we can say, therapeutic approach is rehabilitation, because rehabilitation can influence the neuroplasticity. That is a mechanism that we can use in order to maintain or improve functions when functions are not so well established for the reason of the neurodegenerative diseases. So neurorehabilitation is a therapy for multiple sclerosis, but also for other neurodegenerative diseases. In this context, the use of technology is fundamental. In particular, use of technology that can improve adherence to rehabilitation treatments, and also that can give some more motivation to people with multiple sclerosis in order to be more active in changing their behavior with regards to rehabilitation or to physical activity.
So one of the challenges today, and it's one of the largest causes of mortality, a lifestyle-related condition, in other words, non-communicable diseases. So are there any measures, again, regardless, outside of the benefits of technology, are there any preventative healthcare steps that people can take to reduce the effects of multiple sclerosis, or even prevent it in any way? Or is multiple sclerosis a condition which will be prevalent, but its outcomes are worse if you don't carry out certain lifestyle behavior changes? So how much does lifestyle behaviors impact multiple sclerosis?
Yeah, and this is a great question, and is complicated to answer. Of course, there are some studies that are showing the importance of good lifestyle habits, in particular the physical activity, because physical activity can increase your, let's say, motor reserve, and this helps a lot in not in reducing the progression of the disease, but also other exercises. For example, cognitive rehabilitation is fundamental because it can improve your motor and cognitive reserve, and also this is fundamental because this will prevent the subtle cognitive deficits that appears in multiple sclerosis related to deficit in memory, attention, and processing speed. So the behaviors of lifestyle, physical activity, cognitive activity, and so the use also of telerehabilitation and serious games are fundamental in order to prevent disease progression in multiple sclerosis, together with good habits like, for example, reducing the absorption of food, reducing the weight of the person, reducing or complete abolition of smoke. These are good habits that are important also for multiple sclerosis. Unfortunately, there are not known causes of the let's say initiation of multiple sclerosis. So it is difficult to prevent multiple sclerosis.
Yes. Can I just ask you now, because we do have Aaron Orr, who's the next guest in the studio, so we've got a couple of minutes to just ask you about the kind of technologies that you see as being important in the treatment of neurodegenerative conditions like multiple sclerosis.
I think that now we are living in an era in which the use of devices for telerehabilitation and the use of wearables will, I personally think that will completely change and shift the paradigm from the standard delivery of rehabilitation to an hybrid delivery of rehabilitation to digital rehabilitation. This will improve the outcomes on a medium and long terms in multiple sclerosis. In particular, we are using technologies for telerehabilitation produced also from an Italian small medium enterprise that are extremely interesting, and I think that this will completely change the way in which we are living, let's say, with multiple sclerosis.
And I guess gamification as a strategy is very helpful in compliance in these kinds of situations, because it makes therapy more acceptable or more fun, for want of a better word. Well, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon, Gianpaolo. I have now Aaron Orr, who's joined us from across the water in the United States. He is a CEO and founder of XR Health. So I just want to say thank you again, Gianpaolo, for joining us.
Thank you.
I hope we'll continue to have a dialogue and find ways to collaborate in the future. So thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
And welcome to you, Aaron. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. I'd like to ask you to begin with, just to say a little bit about your personal background, how you got involved in this space, and something about what XR Health does.
So first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll start with introducing myself. As you can hear from the accent, originally from Israel. About 8 years ago, after serving as an F-16 pilot in the Israeli Air Force, I started to feel pain in my right hand. After a while, the pain grew stronger, and I couldn't sleep at night without painkillers. I was diagnosed with a whiplash injury due to the active flight and the G-forces. And doing my own rehab, the idea came about to combine VR and rehab. And that's basically what we are doing today. We started as a company that is developing only the medical applications. But about a year and a half ago, before COVID, we decided that we will also open virtual clinics where our own clinician can treat patients remotely using virtual reality headsets and our medical software. So that's in a nutshell.
Oh, okay, yeah. I first came across you, I think it must have been a couple of years ago now, when I got an Oculus Go headset, and I found some of the applications that you had developed to be very, very interesting, not only from a rehabilitation point of view, but also from a diagnostics point of view. Can you say a little bit about the role of VR and the data that you collect from a diagnostic point of view and a treatment tracking point of view?
So I think people sometimes are missing the point that VR is not just an experience. So people a lot of the time are fixated about how good the graphics are and how immersive the entire experience is, while at the same time you are basically putting the user, in our case the patient, inside of a computer-generated environment, which is basically a closed-loop system where the only variable is the patient. So we can manipulate the environment, and again, in our case, it's the therapist doing that, and see how the patient reacts to those changes. And that allows us because it's a closed loop system, to analyze outcomes and to quantify outcomes in a way that it was almost impossible today. So we are measuring today while someone is within our, let's call it a virtual clinic, things like response time, reaction time, differences between right side, left side, cognitive skills over time, concentration capabilities, smoothness of the motion, peak velocity, and now even eye tracking. And when you're combining all of that with the right context, and you know what was the challenge that you asked, or the task that you asked the patient to do, the data is clean and actionable, so you can actually see patient performance, and then a skilled therapist can make a decision whether they need to change something in the patient protocols or not.
Yep, and that uses basically games mechanics and games psychology in a lot of cases to provide the interest and the motivation, as well as capturing data about the performance of the patient. What about biofeedback? Does that play any role in shaping the experiences that people have?
So the first patent that we applied for, which we just got the approval, is the combination of a biofeedback to sense pain, especially heart rate variability, but we also have some other options like galvanic skin response and EEG, to sense pain and to change the virtual reality environment according to the biofeedback, and to have, again, closed loop system where you can not just provide the patient with the right experience, but it will be tailored specifically to the right time, to the right patient, and to their needs based on their biofeedback. So the combination of biofeedback and VR, we believe, will be very, very powerful moving forward, and will be able to harness this technology to tailor the right treatment and the right sequence of events to the specific patient.
Can I just ask you about the business model? We have Dr. Tanjit Singh with us. He joined us from Singapore, and he spoke earlier about his mobile application, which helps with diagnosis of things like stress, and provides effectively coaching through a mobile application, but it does have interfaces to other applications of the type that you've described. So are you looking in any way to partner with other organizations so that you've got APIs that interface with other kinds of solutions in this space?
So first of all, on the VR element, we are partnering up with different types of VR developers that are in the healthcare arena, and we are actively looking for more and more VR content, VR healthcare-related content to offer our patients. So if there's a VR developer out there, please reach out to us. We have different types of business model where and how we can partner up. Regardless, we are looking for different types of partnerships that we can plug into our platform, to our virtual clinics. So if anyone that is now viewing this and you have something that you believe can fit into a virtual clinic that is utilizing VR to treat patients, please shoot me a LinkedIn message or just reach out through the company website.
I think virtual clinics are definitely the way ahead, and I understand in the United States that the people who pay for healthcare are now more open to telemedicine solutions than they had previously. So virtual clinics are becoming, through digital acceleration as a result of coronavirus, becoming more established. Is that the case in the USA?
That's exactly the case. I think so if now the conversation is not why telehealth is important. I think COVID accelerated everything, and now the question is, can we provide outcome as good as a brick and mortar clinic. And that's a completely different conversation, because before COVID, the question was, do we need telehealth? Why do we actually pursuing that? And I think that payers and the entire ecosystem now understand that telehealth has an important role in reducing cost, improve outcomes, just because it's so accessible. And people don't need to drive 45 minutes and wait for a 15-minute appointment with their physician. Again, the question will be is how we harness the technology to provide, at the end of the day, better outcome.
I want to thank you, Aaron, for joining me this afternoon. We are now come up against the buffers of our program scheduled time. It's good to talk to you, and I hope that you will be able to join us in future programs. We've got a schedule coming up which includes programs on mental health and generally fitness, health and well-being. So I just want to thank you and draw the program to close by sharing information about what's coming up within our future program. So thank you very much for that, Aaron. So now I just want to say a few words about our upcoming program. Today we've been talking about digital medicine and for therapeutics and the rehabilitation. We've had some great speakers today, this morning with our speakers, and this afternoon the speakers that you can see on the screen now have all provided different but valuable insights into the use of technologies for rehabilitation and therapeutics. So what we've got coming up, next week we are going to be focusing on mental health and stress management, which came up quite a bit today in some of our conversations, and that's going to be followed on May the 18th by elderly care and assistive technologies, which I know will be of interest to Dr. Tanjit Singh. And on May the 25th, we're going to focus on physical fitness, well-being and personal health management. So I'm going to close now and say thank you very much to those of you who joined us for this afternoon, and I hope that you will join us for these future upcoming broadcasts. Thank you.